Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Brooke Ruffin, Director of Outreach for Street Grace. We are a faith-based nonprofit organization that utilizes evidence-based demand reduction strategies to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And today we'll be discussing what vulnerabilities high schoolers are facing in regard to sexual exploitation and what you can do to keep yourself and your friends safe online. We're so grateful that our special guest, Alia El-Sawi, is here again with us today. If this is your first time joining us, Alia has done two previous trainings, one for parents and one for middle school students. So if you're interested after this training, visit streetgrace.org/resources to access the other trainings. So without further ado, let me introduce all of you to Alia El-Sawi. She is the Victim Assistance Specialist for Homeland Security Investigations for Georgia and Alabama. In this capacity, she designs and provides educational trainings and outreach to law enforcement, attorneys, mainstream service providers, and community-based organizations on human trafficking and child exploitation. Additionally, she's involved in conducting victim interviews and connecting victims with services. She is a recipient of the Georgia's Trends Top 40 Under 40 Georgians for her career accomplishments. She's traveled overseas to train foreign governments on human trafficking in Chile, Peru, Brazil, Hong Kong, Macau, Vietnam, and most recently, Budapest. Alia speaks Arabic, French, Spanish, and conversational Portuguese. So, not to outdo you, Alia, I am learning sign language. So
Oh, great.
don't be intimidated. She has a bachelor's degree from Mercer University in International Affairs and in French. Additionally, Alia has her master's degree from Boston University in criminal justice with a focus in victimology. So again, thank you for spending your time with us. The information that you have provided us thus far has been invaluable. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to tune in, I definitely recommend doing so. So let's get started.
Thank
Aaliyah, could you tell us a little bit about what you do and what a typical day looks like?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And I am so incredibly happy to be here again today for the third and final session with Street Grace. I thank you all for giving me this platform and this ability to be able to get this message out. So I first wanted to say that. So thank you. So as I've mentioned with each of my sessions, I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world because I'm in a position where I get to assist our special agents, my teammates that go out and investigate these crimes and arrest all of the criminals behind these particular crimes involving child exploitation, as well as human trafficking and other egregious crimes. And I also get to work directly with the victims of these crimes. So I get to kind of see that transition from when they're first vulnerable and they've been victimized, and kind of get to go on this longer journey with them to see where they end up, and see that they're able to, become stronger individuals and kind of grow from the unfortunate victimization that they've gone through. Um, my day is very different day to day. I have boring administrative stuff that a lot of us have to keep up with, whether it's keeping up with statistics, report writing, that kind of thing, maintaining our databases, to more of the fun stuff, like being out in the field and getting to interact with victims, parents, families, helping with the victim interviews, trying to find resources for these victims so that they can become a little bit more stabilized and self-sufficient. And yeah, no day is ever the same. Just last week, I was out on 2 search warrants, and then I wrapped up my week by helping out with forensic interviews that we had a local child advocacy center set up and conduct those. And so part of my week was expected, but then the other part of my week, I had no idea what to expect. So um, I think the most important part of my job is the fact that I get the support and partnerships with the organizations like Street Grace, like a lot of the other nonprofits and non governmental organizations that we work with, as well as our friends within local and state law enforcement. So, couldn't do the work that I do without my team. So,
Wonderful. Yes, partnerships are essential in this line of
absolutely.
business, of course. So, how do you think high schoolers are vulnerable to cyber crimes, and how prevalent are these types of cases among high schoolers?
Sure. So, like I've mentioned, I've done two other sessions before. One was specific to parents, the other was specific to middle schoolers. So, I do want to say before we get started that if you have kids that are a little bit younger than high school aged kids, just be aware. I'm putting that out there because this session's a little bit more forward and a little bit more blunt, just because of the age group that I'm speaking to today. But with cyber crimes, in particular child exploitation, unfortunately, this type of criminalization does not discriminate in terms of age. So we see cases involving young elementary school aged kids, up to high schoolers, up to kids that are 18 years old and even older. Um, the issue is that these perpetrators, some of them have very specific ages that they like to target. Some of them may not. Some of them may have a preference as to gender. Some of them may not. So, like I said, this is not a type of crime that discriminates based on age or gender or even your background. We've had victims that are, you know, white, black, ethnic, various socioeconomic statuses. So again, it's all over, and we've had cases, unfortunately, that have targeted this specific age group, meaning high school aged. And so that's why I'm here today to hopefully shed some light on how you can be a little bit safer with your online usage and when you're out there using social media, using your phone, playing games. So that's the whole point of today. So this is very specific to you, and hopefully some parents and school folks are joining us today too, so that they can kind of take this away as well.
Definitely. So, what are some apps and social media sites that we should be aware of?
I always like to say, be aware of them all. And um, just like with anything, you have the good and the bad. So, obviously, social media these days, and in particular with COVID-19, it is our way of communicating with the public. It is the way that adults are communicating, that children are communicating, that teens are communicating. And so, we just have to be careful with our online presence in general. But some of the ones that we've had recent cases on involve Snapchat, Kick, which a lot of parents may not be familiar with Kick, but when I go out and do these types of presentations to high schoolers, middle schoolers, a lot of hands go up, and a lot of folks have used Kick or even Kick Flirt, which is uh, it's part of Kick, but it's called Kick Flirt. We even have cases where we've gotten leads from Skype, from Facebook, Instagram, some of the more common ones that we're used to hearing. But then you have some that that you may not think, oh, well, there's some vulnerability that might exist there, or there may be predators that are preying upon kids on these particular ones. And that could be from something as simple as Pinterest, where we typically think, oh, this is a space where we exchange recipe ideas or workouts or whatnot. Well, it's also a place where unfortunately predators may be able to engage with teens, high school age teens, to see what some of their interests are and kind of start looking at that as one way to begin that conversation. And then based on their username, they could possibly go from Pinterest or WhatsApp to somewhere else, where they may find them on social media and continue that dialogue. And so um, it's a very dangerous thing to kind of put yourself out there and not take caution when you're accessing social media of any sort. So I named off a few. There's also some resources for those of you that registered through Street Grace. There are some resources, and part of that resource is a pretty comprehensive list of apps and social media and messaging tools that you might want to take a look at. And it kind of explains a little bit about what each of those apps or social media's usage is. But it also gives like a little written portion that tells you how it might be, um, where some of these predators might be found preying upon these children.
Right, right. Yeah, I think a lot of us have a false notion of security on the major social media platforms and things like Pinterest, which a lot of people wouldn't even think about. So, on that note, what are some ways that we can protect ourselves online, and what are the red flags that we should be looking out for?
So there are several ways to try to help your I guess your image and your presence online. And I always like to say, one, be careful with who you accept friend requests from, because you never know who's on the other end. You don't know who you're necessarily dealing with. They may have a friend in common or even family members in common, but is that person really who you think you're talking to? A good rule of thumb that I've mentioned in my other presentations is, if it's not someone that's related to you, that you know personally, that you physically met, then you might want to evaluate whether you accept that friend request. Another thing to be cognizant of and just aware of is your username. So, your username and your pictures that you're posting. Your username may have your date of birth or the year that you were born in, or some other identifying factors like part of your name, or even something that you're interested in, whether it be football or soccer. And so that could also be the starting point of where that predator starts to begin conversation, and can possibly find out a little bit more about you. And when I say pictures, I'm not even talking about sexually explicit pictures. I'm talking about pictures where you may have on a T-shirt that indicates what high school you go to, or what part of town you live in. And so, just really be aware of what you put out there. That's possibly where you're giving too much information, not even meaning to. So we just need to be aware of that. And then lastly, I would say, um, when whatever you put on the internet, whatever you put out there, just know that you want to think about it before you hit that click button, because you may be sending a picture to a boyfriend of yours. Say you're 16 years old, okay, and your boyfriend is 16, and you get to where you're sexting one another and you're sending pictures, of yourself naked or body parts of yourself. um, I just tell you to exercise caution, because you don't know where that picture is going to go once it leaves that person's hands. So, in an instance where things don't work out and you may break up with that person, well, if that person, not only does that person possess a picture of another 16-year-old, which by the way is considered child pornography, and possessing child pornography in that capacity is actual a federal crime. So say now you've broken up with that individual and you decide, you know, that you're going to seek revenge, and you're going to now start rumors and show pictures that you may have once received, or videos that you may have once received, to some of your other friends at your high school. Well, now you're distributing child pornography, also a federal crime. And so that's one thing that I always see, that look of shock whenever I do these presentations in person, and I see the high schoolers looking at me like, well, yeah, we sexed. yeah, I send my boyfriend or I send my girlfriend pictures of, myself naked or body parts, very sexually explicit pictures or videos. Well, that's child pornography. And like I said, it's a federal crime. So um, be careful because once it's out there, it's out there. So um, I know that these are just a few of the red flags to kind of, or things to be aware of, but hopefully there's some more that we can talk about as we go on.
Definitely. And you kind of just led into our next question perfectly, but we often hear this term sextortion.
Mhm.
So, can you explain to us exactly what that looks like for those where this is a new term to them?
Sure. Sextortion, I hope that this is a term that people become a little bit more aware of what it means because we are seeing an increase in these types of cases. Um, these cases usually involve more than one victim. So you have a perpetrator that has perhaps engaged in conversation and chats with a juvenile. And by juvenile, I'm referring to anyone under the age of 18. And they've engaged in chats. It quickly becomes pretty sexual in nature. And a lot of times, the young individuals may think that they know that person, or they may realize that this is a complete stranger, but they may have met them on some type of group where you share a common interest. Okay. And um, the common interests, you start off talking about that, but then it becomes a conversation where this individual is gaining more information from you and is now at the point where it's becoming it could be a little uncomfortable. They could be asking you to send pictures, videos that are sexual in nature. With these particular cases, we see typically one of two things. Either the person is sending, basically bribing the victims, the juveniles, and saying, if you send me, these are great pictures, these are great videos. If you send me more, then I'll send you a gift card. Or I will Venmo you money or send you money somehow, um, buy them gifts somehow. And we've seen this actually, a case that I'm currently working on. That's one of the tactics. And so we we see that there's that side where they're trying again to bribe these kids, but then we also see where it can turn pretty ugly pretty quickly. So now you've got this predator that's engaging with an underage girl or boy, and what started off as somewhat friendly has now quickly become pretty frightening and scary. And now this person is demanding pictures and videos, and they're demanding more and more to the point where these victims feel like they're trapped. They feel like if they do not comply with what these predators are saying, then they're going to suffer the consequences. And unfortunately, those consequences a lot of times are blasting pictures or videos of them to their parents, um, grandparents, friends, schools, other family members. Um, we've even had cases where the videos have been put on porn sites like Pornhub and others, and that is terrifying. And remember what I said just a few minutes ago: what goes on the internet um, pretty much stays on the internet. Luckily, with the porn sites, we were able to get those down because they were juveniles that were involved in that particular case. But it's out of your hands, and you also don't know who that perpetrator has sent those images or videos to. Um, so it's pretty terrifying.
Definitely, definitely. Well, we understand that Homeland Security Investigations investigates these types of cases regularly. So, can you share with us a few of the child exploitation and sex trafficking cases that you all have worked?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start off by elaborating a little bit more on, some of our sextortion cases without giving too much detail. But these cases, like I said, it's using extortion through sexual means. But we've seen that a lot of these kids of both sexes as I mentioned, feel trapped and feel like they are now in the wrong, that they have, complied with some of the requests of these perpetrators. And so now they feel like they have to continue with this. And unfortunately, a lot of these victims suffered tremendously. I've had several that had suicidal ideation. They were either attempting suicide or cutting themselves. I had some that developed eating disorders, some that experienced nightmares and PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, paranoia, anxiety. And to say that these young kids were able to overcome this victimization, I think it's an understatement. It took a lot, and it takes a lot um, for you kids to get over something so horrific. And I'm talking about victims that may have interacted with some of these perpetrators for as short as a week's span of time to years. And it really affected the families. I mean, we saw that there were parents getting divorces because of what's been happening. We've seen, sexual deviancy. We've seen siblings that have been affected by it because at times some of these perpetrators were so terrible that they would request videos of kids touching themselves in the worst way possible, using objects, um, actually demanding that they do things with their siblings, with their cousins. Um, Absolutely horrific. And I know that I'm being pretty blunt about it. And I wish I could say that, we don't see this pretty often, but with our sextortion cases, we see it a lot. Um, with other types of online exploitation cases, it could start off with something where it was cyberbullying and kind of grow into another type of um, exploitation, whether it be pornographic in nature or even sex trafficking. In this day and age, the internet is a way that sex trafficking is growing. We see that a lot of these traffickers are becoming more savvy. They know where to target this particular age group, high schoolers in particular, and they go to these social media apps. They start the conversations, and they start their recruiting and their grooming online. And especially with high school age kids, a lot of you have, your driver's license, you have a car, you're able to drive. And so it can get to the point where you may have these perpetrators that are wanting to meet up in person. And then it really does become a physical issue. So not only are you suffering psychologically and emotionally, but now you may have the possibility of suffering physically as well. Um, there are threats that are made to family members with each of these investigations that we look into, and it's pretty terrifying. Um, you know, I would say that parents um, need to be, a little bit more involved in realizing what your child is doing at any age online and who they're engaging with. And with high schoolers in particular, um, it's through the friend groups. So um, it's not just kids going to talk to their parents about it, but sometimes it's their friends. They tell a friend what's going on. So
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for, the grace that you have when with dealing with such a difficult situation. It's of course more than needed in our society in this time. So, what's the best way a high schooler can reach out for help if they suspect that they've encountered someone online or if they are being taken advantage of? How do they start that conversation with a trusted adult or parent?
So I think that, going to your parent, because you might think at some point it's too late. to go tell my parent or someone at school, a teacher, a guidance counselor, or, a school resource officer, um, or even a friend. You might think it's too late, but it's not, because once you get that help, you'll or reach out to someone and let them know what's going on. Hopefully, they'll quickly realize that you are actually not in the wrong, for being involved in this. You were preyed upon. You are now being seen as a victim, and so we tell the adults that are involved, to please make sure that you report, these types of cases. And when you do report it, parents are, a lot of times so quick to want to problem solve. And, one thing that's super important for both parents and even kids, um, do not delete those chats, do not delete those pictures, do not delete those videos. That is all evidence that we can use, to help make our case. And so I know kids may be, going back and deleting everything, just in hopes that it would go away. But in actuality, these are all things that we need. And so, you know, go have that open conversation, as tough as it is. We're talking about some tough material today, and it's all very scary and frightening. Um, but at the end of the day, I think that there will be that sense of relief and hopefully that justice that you deserve.
Definitely. And it can lead to the safety for so many, and even your friends that you're sharing this information that you learned today with. So, thank you so much for your time, Aaliyah. Are there any last minute remarks that you would like to share with our friends today?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, we do have, resources available for those of you that, signed up through Street Grace. And some of those resources are available on, our website through Homeland Security Investigations. Like, we have what's called the, iGuardian campaign. And this is just, it comes with some, like, um, these cards that you can kind of trade, and it explains, some cyber safety. And that's one, excellent resource, as well as our, human trafficking blue campaign, which we also have some material for that. And also, we have a new campaign, that's also called the, stop trafficking campaign. And then, obviously, Street Grace is a wonderful resource. You all have so much on your website, that's specific to child exploitation and human trafficking, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as NetSmarts, which falls under NCMEC. They have all sorts of tools and resources available for parents, schools, for you kids, and it's kind of divided up into different age groups. They've got videos. So a lot of resources out there. Just be safe, be careful, go talk to someone if you, feel like something is happening. And if you're a friend of someone that is going through something like this, it's good for you to be there for them and to, help push them to tell someone. Remember, you're not in trouble. We're here to help you and, help put an end to this.
Yes, I think there are probably a lot of high schoolers watching this realizing that they have made mistakes. So, removing that shame from the conversation, this is all about safety, making the change going forward, and having that table conversation with
Yes,
the adults in your life that you trust.
exactly.
So, well, thank you everyone who joined us today. If you were with us via Zoom, we have your email and we will email you a resource packet. If you're watching on Facebook Live, YouTube, or Vimeo, please email info@streetgrace.org and we will get you that information as well. Aaliyah, it was an honor as always. Thank you so much for not only doing the work that you do, but for taking the time to share your expertise to help us all become more educated on how to prevent sexual exploitation. So, have a great day, everyone. And don't forget to share what you learned with your friends. You never know who could be suffering from any of the topics that we discussed today. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter.
Thank you. Bye.